Hello, my name is Ryan Williams, and this is the biographical overview of Anselm of Canterbury. Anselm lived from 1033 to 1109. He was born in Aosta, Italy, to a noble family. His father intended on him going into politics and opposed his decision to become a monk. Anselm was educated at the Abbey of St. Leger, and then he left for Burgundy, France in 1057. After this, he left for Normandy for 2 years and finally settled in a Benedictine monastery in Bec, Normandy. It was here that he would study under renowned theologian Lanfranc. Anselm became prior to the monastery in 1063 and later became abbot from 1078 to 1093. Lanfranc died in 1089, leaving the seat of archbishop vacant. After a 4-year vacancy in the seat of archbishop, Anselm was forced by William II to take the pastoral staff of archbishop. Anselm took it reluctantly. Anselm is known as the father of scholasticism. He held to the Augustinian tradition and believed that understanding should begin with faith. He is quoted in the first chapter of his Proslogion saying, "For I do not seek to understand in order to believe, but I believe in order to understand." Anselm used dialectics and formal logic to demonstrate the truths of the faith. While Anselm was prior at Bec in 1063, he wrote Monologion and Proslogion. Monologion was an inductive argument for the existence of God. It began with the effect to determine the cause. Essentially, what it said was, man has many goods that he enjoys in life. These goods are simply reflections of the one supreme good through whom we all exist. The Proslogion, on the other hand, or in addition to, it was a deductive argument for the existence of God. This was Anselm's famous ontological argument. Ontology is simply the study of being. In Anselm's ontological argument, he begins by defining God as being that being than which nothing greater can be conceived. This being that nothing greater can be conceived must exist, Anselm argued. It must exist in reality. For if it were to exist in the mind only, and not in reality, a greater being could be conceived as existing in reality and in the mind. For it is far greater to exist in reality and in the mind than it is to exist in the mind alone. Anselm's explanation of the atonement was another of his great contributions to the Christian faith. In Cœur du Homme, translated Why the God-Man, Anselm offered logical proof for the satisfaction theory of atonement, which shows man as the offending party and God as the offended party. It shows man as being the one who owes God for offending him. Greg Allison records that after many centuries of the ransom to Satan theory of the atonement being dominant, Anselm offered a fresh view on the atonement. And this fresh view, the satisfaction theory, would become the dominant view for Christianity in the West. Anselm had picked up on the feudal system in which he lived, and in this feudal system, restitution and honor were key aspects. Allison notes that an example of this would be a serf and a lord. If a serf dishonored his lord by stealing 10 chickens, a satisfactory solution to his problem was not merely returning 10 chickens. No. Satisfaction always demanded a payment that went beyond what was due. If the serf stole 10 chickens, the serf would then owe 15 chickens. Anselm viewed the solution to human sin in the same way. As for the interlocutors, a fellow monk, a contemporary of Anselm named Guanilo, responded to Anselm's argument in A Plea for the Fool, a work by Guanilo. Guanilo reasoned that although one can imagine the most beautiful island, this does not prove the existence of that island in reality. Ferguson notes that ever since Guanilo, the ontological argument has been controversial in philosophy. Descartes, Spinoza, and Hegel have followed Anselm, while others, even as varied as Aquinas and Kant, have not accepted this argument. Aquinas has also offered formal proofs for God's existence based on reason. But while Anselm's argument was a priori, Aquinas' teleological and cosmological arguments were a posteriori demonstrations of God's existence. Now, a priori, I can't pronounce it. A priori means to be before, coming before. And a posteriori means to be after. And Thomas Aquinas offered arguments that were a posteriori, meaning they appeal to human experience as proofs for God's existence. Anselm's argument it demanded that God is the basis of human experience. Some sources that were used in this presentation were, of course, Everett Ferguson, Church History, one of our textbooks. It was great, wonderful read, and an excellent resource to learn about church history. Another one, the big boy, Greg Ellison's Historical Theology. This has been a invaluable resource to many of my classes so far at Voice. Not one of the required texts, surprisingly, but it has proved to be a vital resource in many of the classes. Namely this one. Let's see here. We have Who's Who in Christian History by Douglas. This goes through various people throughout church history and just tells a little bit about them and their contributions and why they're important. You know, it's also great. I got it from my pastor. It's also a great resource. Then we have another church history book, Christianity Through the Centuries by Cairns. It's a little outdated, but got it from my pastor, and it's proved to be a very valuable resource. We have Christian Theology by Platcher, another one of our required readings, and it has been excellent. I very much enjoyed this book. This one has been awesome. Haven't read the whole thing yet, but it is pretty sweet. It is Anselm, Monologion and Proslogion. This is by Thomas Williams. He's the Associate Professor of Theology at the University of Florida. It's been great. Get into some of these works and learn about Anselm. Thank you very much for your time. God bless you.